Hello and welcome to this week's Authentic Twin Flame Messages. I do have a quick ask because obviously, thank you first of all for your very warm reception to my return or the return of these readings. But please do like, comment, share, subscribe if you haven't, because I am now actively needing your help to get this authentic twin flame information out there. You know what I'm talking about. It's really, really important now, which is why I've returned. I'll be showing more on that later, but please just like it, because I'm guessing you like it. Share, comment, let me know what's going on with you, let me know your thoughts. Yeah, it was brought to my attention as well that this is kind of like the middle of the original masculine feminine reading that I started, I think it's 8 years ago now. Just having a little shuffle of the cards. These are my nice new Next Dimension deck, and then off we will go. The lights of it is coming from this side. I moved this week because it was a bit dark in the other room, so let's have a play with this lovely light. Actually, I'm going to take the cards from, it's a little bit different this week, so we're going to go 1, 2, 1, 2, and then this one wants to come 2, number 3. We're going to put these all together, and we're going to do, bottom of the deck is, strength. Wow. Okay, so what's interesting about the strength card and what immediately jumps out to me in this new deck is there's much more focus on this feminine, peaceful, calming figure than on the lion. But notice this snake on the floor, which is very interesting. And then also notice at the top of the mountain here, we have a dragon in the sky and this kind of Zeus figure with something or someone on his back or holding him. I mean, and what's he got in his hand? I mean, very fascinating. The imagery in this deck is, I love it. Okay, so this bottom of the deck card, this strength, what does it mean? It feels as though it's speaking to this feminine energy, like I said, represented here by the roses, the kind of like floral crown, this kind of like, look at this golden long hair. But there's something a little bit ominous about that snake down there. So again, the snake, I do feel, is indicative of, again, this kind of like feminine energy, going back to this kind of like negative feminine energy, the Eve, the kind of like Eve and the kind of like evil, actually, the evil snake in the Garden of Eden, right? So I feel like there's a little bit of warning in here about negative feminine energy. So everything exists everywhere. Okay. So this can manifest in many, many different ways. It can manifest within you, or it can manifest outside of you. It doesn't really matter where, because everything exists everywhere, if that makes sense. But the kind of message and what I have is genuinely the word beware of negative feminine energy. It's fear. It's fear-based. It's fear-based egoic thinking. But it does feel like it's kind of like trying to get under her skirt, under her dress. So there's something very pure in this feminine figure in the card. She has those beautiful roses. She kind of represents love, softness. Look at the detail there with her kind of like closing the lion's jaw though. She really represents this idea of peace and harmony. And the whole idea of this number 8 being strength. And this really speaks to next year, 2024, which is a very powerful year, which is why I'm here. It's speaking to the idea of strength being knowing when to act and knowing not when to act. Having this fierce, really, really powerful force within you, and knowing when to unleash it and knowing when to calm it. Like a gas pedal in a car, on a vehicle, anywhere. You have to be able to have nuance and a sense of when to put your foot on the gas, when to take it off again, right? But then there's this extra piece with this snake. So it's kind of saying beware of potential danger, snakes in the grass around you, but very feminine snakes in the grass around you. And unfortunately, there's the word evil is coming up. So we don't need to be too afraid or judgmental around it, because it's just the shadow aspect of life. It's just representing pure negativity, okay? Lack of love, essentially. It's fear-based manifestation, okay? If this figure here, she isn't necessarily impacted by this snake, right? So the more attention you give to fear-based, egoic energy, the more trouble it will cause, basically, right? When it comes to getting a hold and understanding your power in this balance of positive and negative. So if you just focus on the job in hand, that snake is kind of like not even noticeable. It's there, but it's not even noticeable because it can't really touch the power that is in that feminine figure in the card, right? But if there's fear and worry and fear of fear, essentially, then that snake could kind of like possibly make an impact. The main message I have is that it's not going to get you, so to speak, as long as you focus on the task in hand. So it's really speaking to these ideas of like fear, but really it is also ego, and really potentially it could and could be manifested as an individual. There's somebody for me that's kind of like manifesting, well, coming to mind as an individual, but there's no kind of like animosity around it. It's just unfortunate that some people just really focus on those, the fear, the story of evil, essentially, and it really just keeps manifesting. And then what happens is, in our fight against evil, we actually become evil, if that makes sense. Anything the usefulness of this idea of evil that we have to kind of like go against, or the darkness, and we have to be the light against the darkness, all this kind of stuff, is that we become combative. Actually, it creates division. So all these people that are kind of like believing in evil so that they can fight against evil, so to speak, it's just a kind of distraction. It's a false light. It's a false experience of the light, because it's just a kind of mechanism. So, it's like you can make yourself look taller. It's a quote from I think it's from a UK politician, or maybe he was quoting somebody else, but it was something about, you don't make yourself taller by standing in short grasses. So essentially, the more you surround yourself with evil, the better you become, if that makes sense. You're the good one surrounded by the evil, right? But to know yourself beyond evil is to really know yourself, and this is kind of speaking to this. I mean, we're 10 minutes in and we're still on this one card. There's so much in here. Notice the infinity symbol above her head, as per the usual strength card. And then this figure on the top of the mountain. I didn't even know if I should really given that much attention. But and this dragon up there. I feel like this is this kind of manifestation of a masculine energy. So it feels like there's a kind of like double negative here, or like a feminine energy here, and then a kind of two masculine things here. But this is this idea of being held back, right? So there's this figure, or these arms or legs or limbs that seem to be wrapped around his waist, you know. So it's similar to this here, this kind of like holding back. So it is speaking to this idea of kind of being held back, and that speaks to me of timing. And that speaks to me of this, we're just coming into 2024, but there's a kind of like a bit of a tardiness, a little bit of a waiting, a little bit of a weightedness to us moving into this 2024, this number 8, and this abundance, and this shift, which I'll be speaking of later on. Okay, so first card up here. There we go, Ace of Pentacles. Amazing. Really speaking of very powerful material energy. And to really focus on the material, on the practical, on the golden. I just love the cards, especially through the camera when I'm recording, when I'm making these. Thank you so much for being here, because this is such a magical space to enter into, and I feel you here. It's so beautiful because the cards really come alive. Like I can see that light is real. The light coming off that golden coin is real. The light hitting that cloud is real. The light on that grass is real. I love this castle, this castle out there in the distance. It's really speaking to a gift from the gods, coming back to this kind of like Zeus-like figure, going into this Greek mythology, or Greek theology, I guess. This idea of really being supported, and that there is a huge amount of material support here for you. It has not felt as though the material world, and what some people were calling 3D, though I don't like to separate it, though I did dream, was it last night or the night before, about different dimensions. I completely believe in different dimensions in terms of traveling in our consciousness. But I mean, these ideas of 3D, 4D, 5D that was in a dream that I had. But this really speaks to the material manifestation of goldenness, and that this powerful truth and love and reality, this golden reality, this golden world. It says that the world, here it comes. The world of twin flames is golden, and it is gilded. It is absolutely gilded. It is not a path of suffering and lack. It may have seemed that way, but remember that everything has its equal and opposite. This does speak to new beginnings, new gifts, new resources being presented, new opportunities. Even before I started recording this morning, I was really thinking about and sending a lot of energy out to all authentic twin flames in terms of them really experiencing an abundance of resources. Because when we're working, consciously or unconsciously, very powerfully in this spiritual sense, it takes a huge amount of energy, and it can seem as though the material world is not important or does not align with that. It is not. That kind of spiritual richness is not manifested in a material way. It can seem that way, which is where all these kind of stories of aestheticism, and not having material resources comes from, in terms of realizing spiritual truth, so to speak, or the truth of life beyond the material. But this really speaks to the richness of the spiritual being reflected in the material world. And it's actually really important that you know this. It is not good to not have. You're supposed to be, having the resources. This is about reclaiming the resources. This is kind of like reclaiming the world in its glory. There is this kind of like story of the dark side, just kind of like in that pentagram, you see. It's just reminding us, and it's the same here with the snake, that we cannot transcend these, let's say, evil. it's not our job to transcend it. It's not the pentacle has the pentagram on it. It's indelible. It's there. There's always a negative presence in the positive of life. And this might be quite difficult and has potentially what's been holding you and many back from really realizing your spiritual truth, or the spiritual truth. The manifestation of your soul in the material world is that we kind of wish and almost know that the soul in its ultimate freedom doesn't experience any kind of resistance or density or opposition. But in a dualistic world, it is necessary. So it's very important never to forget and to integrate these kind of like negative aspects, the snake in the grass, or this kind of like sense of evil. I also know that, and it's coming to mind, there's a few people, and it comes into my consciousness sometimes, this fear around intuition, this space, tarot, imagery, psychicness, whatever you want to call it, that there's a kind of like evil tendency to it. And what I want to say is, absolutely, whenever we are open to the, let's say, different realms of consciousness, everything is accessible on all levels. So, of course, there's potential there for, everything that could possibly exist. Anything you can think of in your mind can exist and be manifested through, let's call it channeled material. But it's really up to you. You're the material through which this information flows. So it's just a tool. It's just information. It's what you do with it and what it does through you that makes it what it is. It itself is neither good nor bad. It's like the wind blowing the tree. The wind is the wind. You might say, the wind blows off all the leaves off all the tree, or blows the tree down. The wind is bad. The wind, blows the seeds off the flowers which help to reseed the meadow. Then the wind is good. The wind is the wind. It doesn't really matter. You are the most important one. And so you do what you will with the gift that is given to you here and everywhere. Second card we have, Four of Wands. Awesome. Wow. Going back to this, so this Four of Wands was always very inspiring to me. This idea of it kind of represents this 11-11, balance, marriage, freedom, togetherness, balance. I love that in this backside vision of the card, so to speak, we can see the celebratory movement and kind of like party atmosphere of the other people on the other side. That there's this sense of community and celebration and lifting up those floral offerings almost, to the sky. That there is a really big sense of victory here. And again, this kind of like masculine and feminine ideas and this real coming together of, I want to say ideas. But the biggest message that's coming through here, and this is again kind of like why I'm returning, is that this whole twin flame story and experience is really about service to the world. And if you're not focusing on how that manifests, firstly, you cannot do it if you do not first grasp this, that in every moment you have everything you possibly need to support you, and that you are ultimately abundant in this material world. That has to be grasped first. Then you can take that forward out into the world in your service. In this union, right, I'm going to use that word union. Going to use it. Don't get too excited. Or attached. Because this idea of union within this kind of like twin flame language it's not even a goal. It can't be a goal, because the realization is that we are one, that is the realization, that we are integrated, that this partnership is just, it's ridiculous. It's really to understand the reality of being human, which is that we are half feminine and half masculine, right? That's how we are created. And so it really is to realize who we really are in that way. To experience that in a romantic fashion rather than a parental fashion is to know that somebody other than your parents is part of you, so that we can then understand that we are all one family, under one sun. So really that is the goal, is that the goal is that realization. And how does that manifest? That is your service. As is with all manifestation, the way that manifestation works is you focus on what happens after your desire is fulfilled, not the desire. So if you are seeking some sort of experience of union, however you want, whatever that looks like for you, with anybody, with a twin flame, with a partner, the way to manifest that, so to speak, is to focus on what happens on the other side of that. So, and that isn't like what do we do together to serve the world, though it may be that. It's more who do I become in service to the world when all of my dreams have come true, because this is really what this is speaking of. I mean, Ace of Pentacles plus Four of Wands in a twin flame reading. I mean, it couldn't be more all of our dreams have come true. Though let's see what's happening over here with number 3. Ha ha ha. Of course, this is the reality. This is speaking of this idea of the flip side, of the shadow, of the integration. You cannot have positive without the negative. There's this fear-based thinking that has really, really separated us from allowing opposites to be one, right? Because we can absolutely experience feminine and masculine as negative and positive, right? They're just necessary. It's just necessary. It's a necessary part. It's really wanting your attention. And in this twin flame story, this is represented by obsession, greed, ego, attachment, as they say. Look at it from behind. You can really see this like hairy bum of this this winged devil, this fallen angel, right? And the words that always come up is there's nothing to fear but fear itself. This is just the flip. This is the flip side of the flip side, the backside of the flip side, so to speak. And it is kind of not warning, but inviting you to just really embrace or just acknowledge these aspects. And I think what's really important about my presence here is that we really get a hold of this, and we don't. This is the side that has been absolutely abused and manipulated, and has all these people going on about trying to sell people on some sort of fairy tale, because there's this kind of obsession, and it's really ego attachment, like I must have-ness that doesn't need any judgment. Like, it's great. The desire itself, I must have. Awesome. Use that. What must you have? It's topical for the moment. There's been a death of a very famous person that seemed to have it all. And this kind of horrendously sad story of how, okay, I thought that winning the material world was going to make me happy, and it didn't. That's what this devil card really speaks to. there are many, I've worked with hundreds of twin flame couples, so to speak, and there are many, many manifestations of the relationship, and they feel the same, right? This is a collective experience. This negative experience, or these experiences of separation, which then trigger this kind of like intense desire and obsession and need and want, which is just power. It's power, it's motivation, it's fire, you know. This is, of course, it can cause suffering. It can cause intense suffering. And even in its kind of like realization of it, we cannot, this energy is not to be transcended. So basically what I'm trying to say is I've had people in twin flame union, so to speak, or people in separation, so to speak, and all across a whole spectrum. Or they're just sleeping together, or they haven't seen each other for 15 years or 20 years, or they see each other every day, or they're in a relationship, or they're not in it, whatever you want to call it. Any single manifestation of any sort of, you know, connection you could basically experience. And the experience, the emotional experience of the individuals has been exactly the same. This is for you as part of the collective. If you don't understand that you are a vessel and a vehicle for up leveling and elevating the collective, because this is the point, if that isn't even your focus and the realization of this is who and what you are, you will suffer in this energy, because it's going to kind of like eat you alive. And just that devil will be on your shoulder being like, just try, kind of like this, you know, Schmeagol in the Lord of the Rings, where it's just this kind of idea of my precious, and I must have my precious, my precious, my precious. That's a very important character and a very important card as part of this story. But if that is the focus, then these just come out of focus, and it seems like they don't exist, right? So it's about integrating all of this as one and enjoying this dance. Let's get the last card. Ooh, Page of Swords. Awesome. So this is about cleaning and clearing out, rising above it as well, rising above ideas, rising above, actually, I feel like this is speaking a little bit of this Seven of Wands energy from last week, where it's kind of inviting you to, it's kind of saying you win. It feels very victorious, this Page of Swords, actually, because it looks like the figure is looking down at these what they've overcome. Also, take a little look down here. Foot on this head. Look, I love these cards. They blow me away. I love them. I just love this little snippets of imagery that we get. So he has his foot kind of lightly resting on this head down here. But this is, wow, this is kind of tricky, kind of tricksy. Sorry, it's the light's getting a bit out of focus. There's a positive aspect in this where it's speaking of this victory over those that was making you feel bad, if that makes sense. So these kind of old ideas that do not fit, right? The old world, the old ideas that do not fit. But there's also this kind of idea that we have to take responsibility, or you have to take responsibility for whenever we elevate ourselves, when you elevate yourself to a different level of consciousness, which is kind of represented by this sword, different intellectual level of consciousness, there will be people that have gone before you that are trampled by your presence. And yes, it's important to have humility around that. It's speaking to this idea of humility. Traditionally, that Page of Swords can be seen as a bit of a kind of like reactive, not very thought through, immature, childlike energy. In this deck, it doesn't feel, or in this position at this time, it just doesn't feel that way at all. It feels necessary. that there's this new wave, new life, new mountain that has been scaled, of which, you know, you're at the top. And it's of thought. It's leading in thought, leading in consciousness. It's that the intellect is really matching up with the spiritual experience. But what happens is, you know, we're standing on the heads of giants, right? It's that we mustn't forget everyone and everything that has gone before us to get us to this point. So there's humility in this elevated position that we're in, and reminding you that you are here to elevate humanity through this, on the other side of this union that you are in, is, and this merging that you have experienced, is this new life, new way of thinking, new world that you are, of which you are at the helm, right? So it's just reminding you to have humility, but also just to forgive yourself, not to forgive yourself, but kind of this idea that we have to kind of get the old out to let the new in. But if you focus on this clarity and truth, then it will be easier to allow this kind of like trampling on the old ideas, because it's really speaking to this idea that there's of newness, and that in order for there to be new, the old has to be gone. And what used to be the top of the mountain is not the top of the mountain anymore. And you are the leader here. And it is a collective thing. This really speaks to this idea that I've spoken about for a long time, that every single one of you, I'm really just going to speak to authentic twin flames now, really, because I think this is who I've always been talking to. And those that have the ears to hear, it is your job to lead the whole world. But you have to understand that it's everybody's job to lead the whole world. So you have to take responsibility for your leadership. But it isn't leadership over anybody. It's leadership for leadership's sake. It's because essentially you're leading from higher consciousness. You're not leading from a level of consciousness which is I am better than you, and my ideas are better than yours. It's to be led by God, to be led by higher thinking, to be led by a higher mind, that you have of which you are in unique channel. And that is genuinely the role of the Twin Flame Collective, and that every single one of us is here to live this. And it does require the humility to respect what has gone before enough to know when it is time to rise up above it. And I know you know what I mean. This is every single patch of land that you know you're all standing on now. It's your responsibility to rise up above it and lead with your thinking, because this is the swords. With your intellect, with your mind, you have the mind to lead. This is the role of the authentic twin flame. That the authentic twin flame has the level of intellect and discernment to understand how to apply this reality of unconditional love with their mind, with their thinking, with their word that is creative. And this is your time to claim that space, to claim your leadership over your piece of earth. You are standing at the top of the whole world, and it is your world to lead. But you are not leading over anybody. You are leading for leading's sake. You are leading from a higher mind, from higher mindedness in this card. And that's what that's about. So this is where we're going. Cannot wait to see you next week. Readings are going to be uploaded or will drop on midnight or 00 hours Greenwich Mean Time or Universal Time. So Universal Central Time. So on Monday. So for the beginning of the week. But that will be either like a Sunday or a Monday. Either a Sunday evening or a Monday at some point, depending on where you are in the world. But it will be, that's when they will drop. So yeah, every Sunday. And here's the whole reading. Whoops. Sorry about this focus. Come on. Sort yourself out. And then I shall see you next week. Just have a little look at that. Look at that central card there. The balance. Look at it balancing this Pentacles and the Devil. Just a little bit here, a little bit extra about this Pentacles and the Devil idea. So a lot of people mix these things up. They seem to think that material abundance is kind of like these are interrelated, and they are. So it's almost saying that to rule the world materially, we have to get a hold of this negative, aspect. It is quite often that it seems like again, it's kind of like unspiritual. Those with a lack of empathy seem to be the most successful materially. But this kind of like separation. When this becomes greed, then yes, because it's ever present. This is all one. Greed plus this, as these kind of like flip side. If we mix these two up, when this is manifested as greed with this, then yeah, it can seem like this cannot really exist. But when this is present, this isn't greed. It's pure manifestation of resources in wholeness. And it's all here for you. But in the same breath, you cannot have this without this. This representing this idea of, grabbiness, ego, separation, as they call it, obsession, desire, greed, desire that becomes greed, all encompassing. That is just part of the picture of the balancing act, right? But this is at the heart. This is absolutely the heart of everything. And when it elevates, we enter this. Awesome. Love you lots. See you next week.